Just to get Garry calibrated for the room, I'm curious if we could do a little raise hands thing. How many people here are at companies that are less than 500 people? Okay. How about people that are here who work at companies more than 5,000 people? Okay. And how many of you are leading teams? Almost everybody. And how many of you are setting strategy? Almost everybody as well. Okay. Hopefully it helps calibrate.
Incredible room. Thank you so much.
It's an amazing room.
Yeah.
And I think, just to start off, one thing that a lot of people don't know about you is that you were originally a designer before you became YC, and Garry Tan. And one thing I heard, and I'm curious if it's true, is that you actually designed Palantir's first logo.
Oh yeah, I did. The prior logo was, I think it was 6 hexagons that were like the default thing in Illustrator, and people thought that Palantir was a bio company or a chemical engineering company, and I was working on palantirtech.com/jobs, and I knew that in order to hire the best engineers in the world, we weren't going to do it with a logo that made it look like what it was not.
So, fast forwarding a bit, now we're in 2025. How do you see the role of design, the role of designers, design leaders evolving in this age of AI that we're in?
Oh, I'm super excited about it in that, I mean, what's wild is, the people in this room, the designers, like, we can feel the world that is out there. We're the ones who are on the front lines being able to understand, what does the user want and what are their pain points, to be able to empathize with deeply with what's going on out there, and then to try to design the solutions that actually work for them. And in the past, we were very much limited by, actually how many good engineers we could hire, or how big that org could be, and how fast they could work through the backlog. And I think everyone just got a massive 10x boost. So, I realized like there's sort of this general background fear of what's going on in some ways, because anytime when there's change, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for tech? Like, is there a fixed amount of software that the world actually needs? And, I think the reframe, going back to my Palantir days, 20 years ago, sitting down with Peter Thiel and Joe Lonsdale and Stephen Cohen, the founders of that company, the idea of that was that the biggest problems in the world, the Fortune 500s, the governments of the world, were not able to hire people who, like our friends at Meta could hire. Like, they literally could not get access to engineering talent to solve any of these problems. And then the zoom out here is, if you look at like the percentage of GDP that is actually, touched by software or the things that the people in this room can build, it's still way smaller than the actual total demand for what is out there. And so this is a time of like sort of market expansion and acceleration, and that's a really good thing.
I agree. And I think recently you said that 25% of the YC batch had 95% of code generated by AI. I had to look at my notes to make sure that was right. Where does vibe coding shine? And also, where does it fall short?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely amazing for, I work with about 800 startups a year, and they are generally one to 3 people working on a brand new project. So vibe coding works really, really well when you have no code base at all yet. I think the tech is getting a lot better, so increasingly a lot of the things that could not work for larger code bases, I think in the next 2 to 5 years, or even like the next 6 to 9 months, you're going to see a lot more really useful tools for much more established, much larger code bases. But for now, it's great to go from 0 to 1. But once you're in the billions, I can see how that would be a little bit less useful.
I guess zooming out, if there's new companies, new entrants that can move so fast to get to that initial prototype or initial thing that they launch, but then a lot of folks here are working in organizations with large code bases. That's maybe the case of why you move slower as a large organization. But if you flip it, there's also the case of large organizations have advantages too, beyond the balance sheet. How do you think about that?
I mean, people who are in large organizations, we were just talking about this yesterday with the founders, actually. If you're a startup, you don't really ultimately want to sell to tiny businesses. You want to sell to the biggest businesses because they're smart and they actually can move on a dime. And then the only downside is it can be hard to move quickly. But the craziest thing with size is if you both have an incredible customer base and all of these moats, and you can move fast, what is sort of the biggest liability turns into actually an absolute dominant killer trait. And so it just requires that speed, and it's a choice.
You mentioned moats. What do you think is the difference of moats in software 5-10 years ago versus today?
We just had Varun Mohan over on the Lightcone channel on the YC podcast, and it was wild to hear him about like his first version, right?
Is it the founder of Windsurf?
The founder of Windsurf, yes, and he only had 20 people working for him at the time, and what he did was not just launch for one platform or just VS Code. He launched across like 5 or 6 platforms all at once, and so I think the stakes are higher than ever for speed. Like if you can actually, more is more at some level. And, the teams that seem to be able to create sort of this, you have 50-person teams now that can get to 20, 50, 100, several $100 million a year in revenue. And one of the salient features of that is each person, like those 20 people are all extremely cracked. It's a very new thing. It did not happen like 3 or 5 years ago.
And for everybody here, how should they be taking that point? What lessons should they learn from it? And how should they think about what to apply to their own teams, their own org structures, who to hire?
Yeah, the funniest story from that was Varun said that his top executive who was not technical was using Windsurf to automate his own sales processes, and as a result, not buy SaaS. I thought that was very interesting, actually. That was totally wild that you can just make software internally. I think that this is such a powerful thing that across all of our orgs, like there are just things that are still being done rotely by hand that, and then there are also like really delightful things that you can do now. As an example, inside Y Combinator, this past weekend, because I knew Gemini 2.5 Pro, the newest Google AI model, came out maybe about a month ago, and it got to 1 million token context. Like the number of things that suddenly you can do, like it might not be able to load your full giant code base yet, but what it could do, for instance, was on Monday I had a big alumni event, and I could load all the biographical info and all the info from my system of record Postgres database into that context window, and I could figure out, who is the one person each person coming to my event should meet and why. And we basically wrote a couple prompts, sent it out, and that was like a new thing that, what would that take? It would take, 3 or 4 people, maybe half an afternoon to actually do. And, here we wrote maybe, like 4 or 5 sentences, and because it had tool use and had access to our code, our agent infra let us do that whole thing really with no code, actually. And so that's, you could be doing that for all kinds of things. Like, I think that people are going to deploy agent infra on top of your system of record. There'll be like a access control sort of layer or API in between. But I think we're entering this other mode of like you're just going to be able to move so much faster.
And when it comes to speed, the pace of models releasing is relentless. And each time there's a new release, there's new capabilities unlocked. Gemini Pro 2.5 or 2.5 Pro. Can't keep up with the naming schemes, that's for sure. Right. I haven't even had a chance to look at it. I've been at keynote rehearsals, but it seems very impressive. How should people plan when new capabilities are coming online so fast?
I think the cool, I mean, some of it is just keep on top of it. I mean, the amazing thing is a lot of the stuff we can do, you don't need to sign up for any new tool set. Like, one of the things we started doing is you can use 2.5 Pro and Gemini and just, dump JSON. And because, the LLMs are just native to both the data and the code, like, it understands your JSON. Like, we just, dump any data that we want it to look at, and it's able to process it like a human.
But I guess in terms of setting strategy, like I think about Figma, and definitely 3 years ago, for example, we kick off a project, we would go through, okay, what is in scope, out of scope, how do we measure success, all the typical stuff, make our product plan, and we go execute. There'd be some check-ins along the way, and eventually we ship it. And it's almost like that model is made for a different world where capabilities are not changing every week.
Right. I guess I just sort of count on the models to be smarter and smarter from here. And so maybe the prompt is you actually just need to be using whatever's out there right now. And there is actually, I'm realizing there is actually levels to being able to prompt. So kind of, just as programmers or designers, like first you start off with the basics and then you move to the next level. Prompting, there are just techniques and things you have to do that weirdly are just in plain English. But a good example of this would be Bob McGrew, former chief research officer at OpenAI. He wrote this morning about how when you use this stuff and it doesn't work, one of the number one debug things that you should do is take the prompt and then read it as if you're going to do that work. And if it's just, and often what you will find is there's just missing pieces that, machine or human, could you do it given the data and the context given? And, often like sort of 80% of the time, it'll just be like, no, even a human given infinite time with the context given would not have been able to actually do it. And that's like very, it's, what that points to is like, these things are not, gods. These things are not omniscient. Like, I think that it's actually, maybe some of the invective around AI is very deleterious for us as a mental model to actually work with these systems. Like, these are not omniscient. They can only do what a human could do with the information given.
And I know that inside of YC, there's quite a lot of tech you're developing as well. I think a lot of people think of YC as this incubator, and it's a lot more than that.
Oh, yeah.
What have you learned with your own work in terms of lessons that folks should be thinking about here?
Absolutely. One of the trickier things at YC is like we do have a crazy volume of inbound. We get more than 80,000 applications every year. And then we actually had to go through an internal reorg recently, realizing that by default, using sort of non-LLM AI models previously, we were accidentally going to turn ourselves, YC is actually composed of 12 equal investing partners, including myself, and we were going to turn us, the leadership of the organization, into data labelers. Like, we were going to be robots doing the bidding of what the algorithm needed to know in order to help us with processing things like the number of applications. We got more than 12,000 applications for 3,000 spots for our upcoming AI startup school, for instance. So we're sort of, we're sort of like a events and hospitality and social network software business that monetizes by taking equity. And then it turns out like there are just tasks absolutely everywhere in our org where, the human intelligence might be instructed by a software system that you need to do X, Y, or Z. And then my partner, Pete Kuman, actually just came out with this amazing essay about agency and prompting. So the example he had was, if you use Gemini, like Gemini is now being embedded into all Google products, it's a little annoying. And then the worst part of it is, all AI systems are sort of broken up into system prompt and user prompt. And his point is that if you only allow your users or yourselves to have access to the user prompt, you are ultimately below the API line. There's this great thinker named Venkatesh Rao, who during sort of the Web 2.0 days, he sort of talked about Uber as, there's an API line, and do you want to be, it's so much more powerful to be Uber or an engineer or designer working on Uber than it is to be an Uber driver. And so my prompt to all of you in this room is you are the leaders of, well, the tech revolution in a lot of ways. You're the leaders of bringing about technology in our society, and every single one of us has to, you're going to have to make this decision that we had to make, which is we're not going to subject ourselves to being under the API line. We're going to open the prompts. And what that allows us to do is basically whatever we want. Instead of becoming robots that have to do what the algorithm says, or there's a task list and let me just knock off my tasks, I want to open up my computer and I want to have an empty prompt that allows me to, I want the computer to truly be a bicycle for my mind. And when we build our organizations, we build our internal tools, and we build software for our users, I think the prompt is like, how do we give them maximum agency? How do we let them write not just the user prompt, which is what Google allows you to do. The example from Pete's essay is that he wants to be able to write the system prompt, so he can actually even change things like the tone when Gemini writes an email for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's the biggest question for each and every one of us. And what we had to do was say, actually, we are going to open the prompts, and we're going. We want to be cyborgs. We do not want to be robots.
I think that when you consider mapping out processes, thinking about possibilities, this is what design is excellent at. This is what designers are excellent at. But there's also sort of a missing factor that I know that you care a lot about, which is the eval step. And one thing we've seen at Figma is that the folks that write the best evals are actually designers.
Amazing.
I would be super curious to hear what you've learned there.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. What we see, like with our 800 companies a year right now, is we're sort of the commercialization arm of the AI labs, and then the actual moat for startups very early are actually the evals. So they're going behind. We call it going undercover. Even literally, some startups they get a job working in, say, medical billing or these other things, like just so that they can deeply understand what someone actually does day to day. And then out of that experience, comes data and evals and testing that ends up being actually the moat for these startups, which is very interesting.
Yeah, it's a whole new way to look at it.
Yeah.
What sort of traditional corporate wisdom should people hold on to, and what should they reject right now?
Oh man, I'm on an agency kick. Just our reorg around how we think about AI internal to YC is making me realize that, simultaneous to that, look, everything's changing. I think I have to bring up the founder mode essay, I guess. So Airbnb founder Brian Chesky, he's on my board at YC. He had to go through this moment realizing that he had to increase his own agency by actually going all the way into the weeds and understanding what's going on, and then actually making decisions, sometimes unpopular ones, to actually make sure that it aligned with what his goals were. And what he learned from doing that is that by taking more agency as a leader, he actually unlocked agency for his direct reports and for that whole organization. And so that, to me, that's actually what founder mode is. It's not that there's a leader who then tells everyone what to do. It's actually the leader is clear about the direction and what things need to happen. And then instead of falling to policy, or this is the way we always do it, or politics, or that person has that fiefdom, so it's their call, it's actually, it goes from this disconnected, policy-driven bureaucracy into alignment, and then actually it unlocks agency for everyone in the org too. So rather than nobody can do anything and everyone is at odds with one another, everything sort of gets aligned and we're running in the same direction. And we've been seeing organizations all the way across, certainly the startup world, hear that message, realize it, and then not go into micromanagement mode, but actually like real agency mode. And now is probably the most powerful time ever. Like literally, we can zap the rocks with more electricity and we can get intelligence. And then that intelligence can in turn ideally be at our direction, at our agency, at the agency of the people in this room. And that's a really, really, what a time to be alive.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I know we're at time, so maybe just one last question, which is, if you're going to leave everyone here with one last piece of advice or framework, one way to think about the world that will help them, what would it be?
Oh gosh. We just started a new YC batch. Everyone gets a gray T-shirt that says "Make something people want." I mean, I think I love that design maxim is actually at the core of what we do, and I think it's something worth repeating. I think you can basically never go wrong by keeping that, like turning it into a mantra inside everything you do and how you make decisions.
Yeah, that doesn't change with AI. Always keep the user in mind and make something people want.
That's right.
Garry, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Garry.
Thanks, brother.